All right, I'm Bryan Comer from Tobias McCormick and Comer, and I'm here with Lieutenant Joe Piggott of the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency. Lieutenant Piggott, I appreciate you being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
We're here to talk about 3 new laws that went into effect back in September that affect people on the roadway. But before we get into that, could you just kind of tell us who you are and what you do with ALEA?
Well, sure. I'm Lieutenant Joe Piggott. I've been in law enforcement since 1992, so I've been at it for a while. Came over to the Department of Public Safety in 1996, transitioned to ALEA when it took over in 2015. I've been here in Highway Patrol Division ever since 1996, about 23 years.
Okay, and so you patrol the roads pretty much every day, huh?
Sometimes. My position is Assistant Troop Commander. I'm over 8 counties in southwest Alabama to ensure that everybody's getting the service that they need from the Highway Patrol, of course.
I got you. Well, like I said, I appreciate you being with us here today. And so we're here to talk about these 3 new laws. Could you kind of take us through each one? And let's start with the move over law.
Sure. The move over law, like I said, is nothing new. I believe it was passed in 2005 initially as a result of just the sheer amount of first responders being killed on the side of the road. So the law was passed. And essentially, it calls for, like on a 4-lane highway, if you're able to move over, you see emergency vehicles on the side of the road, law enforcement, medical personnel, fire department personnel. It even extends now to utility workers, construction workers, even garbage men. On the side of the road, if you're able to move over 1 lane, you're required by law to do so. If you can't move over 1 lane, you're required to slow down 15 miles per hour under the speed limit. So typically on the interstate, where we typically see this, the speed limit is 70, you're required to slow down to at least 55. If you can't move over. You have to move over if you can, but if you can't, you're required to slow down. And on 2-lane roads, if the speed limit is greater than 25, you slow down 15 under. If the speed limit is less than 25, you just have to run 20, which is sort of confusing. The big takeaway is slow down.
Right.
You're passing these guys out here on the side of the road, these men and women, at mere inches sometimes. And despite the fact that it's been a law for as many years as it has, we still see it routinely. We get buzzed on the side of the road. We see, as recently as here in the recent past, we had the Escambia County fireman killed over in Ball County at a crash scene. It's something that we see every day. There are hundreds of law enforcement and first responders injured and killed on the side of the road every year. So what this law did, while it's nothing new, what this act did rather was increase the fines for not complying with the law. Okay,
and so it upped it, I believe, to 100, 150, and 200
Correct.
Per occurrence?
Right.
Okay, and so I guess the main takeaway, like you said, is to move over and slow down if you can't move over.
Sure.
Because I imagine that with everything that someone has going on when they're on the side of the road, whether it's a traffic stop or working a construction site, the last thing that you want to have to worry about is somebody coming up a little too close to you and
Sure.
possibly hitting you.
Absolutely. You're on the side of the road doing a job, sometimes performing an emergency function, and you do your best to look out for traffic, but if they could just give you that extra 10, 12 feet by scooting over a lane, that would mean the world to us.
Oh, sure. So that's the first one. The second one requires seatbelts, I believe, in the back seat. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So since 1999, it's been a primary offense in Alabama to wear a seatbelt in the front of the vehicle.
What does that mean?
That means that you can be stopped for only not wearing a seatbelt. Prior to that, you had to be stopped for another violation or receive a citation for it before you could be issued a seatbelt ticket. In 1999, it became a primary seatbelt law. Our seatbelt law became primary, which meant you could be stopped for no other reason than the fact that you're not wearing a seatbelt, and you can be ticketed for that. The fines were dropped tremendously. They did away with the court costs. It just really would want people to buckle up.
Right.
So it's pretty a very simple reminder to put your seatbelt on. And what they did this year, or this legislative session, was the Roderick Scott Act came about. Roderick Scott, was a standout high school basketball player for Robert E. Lee High School in Montgomery. He was killed in 2016 in a crash on I-65 in Chilton County, where a single vehicle crash, ran off the road, rolled over, and ejected 3 people unrestrained in the back seat, and Roderick Scott was killed. Young life tragically cut short for no reason other than he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. So the legislature realized the importance of wearing a seatbelt in the back seat of a car. And right now, we're one of 30 states in the country, 2 territories in the District of Columbia, that has laws pertaining to seatbelts in the back seat. So you're required now, any occupant in the vehicle is required to be in a seatbelt, notwithstanding those that are subject to the child restraint law. Under the age of 6 have to be in a child restraint. Front seat and rear seat occupants now have to be in a seatbelt. and they can be ticketed for not having it on.
Okay, I mean, so the old saying, seatbelts save lives, that applies in the back seat too.
It absolutely does. And, just because it's a new law here in Alabama, Sir Isaac Newton had some laws he spoke about as well, about objects in motion tend to remain in motion. So what we saw over the years was, if somebody runs off the road and hits a tree at 60 miles an hour, they're wearing their seatbelts, the supplemental restraints come out and airbags do their job, but somebody in the back seat that's not restrained, they're still going 60 miles an hour for some period of time, and they cause a lot of secondary damage or injury rather to people in the front seat. They bounce around inside the cars. So anytime we get somebody to wear that seatbelt and stay where you're supposed to be during a crash, front seat occupants as well, if you're not in position for the supplemental restraints to do their job, they refer to you as an out of position occupant. And we've certainly seen injuries occur from people being out of position when the airbag's deployed. Right. You'll see it in the summertime, a lot of, tend to see more of the ladies doing it. They'll put their feet up on the dashboard and drive to the Gulf and don't think anything about it until they hit something. And that airbag comes out at 150 miles an hour or better, and it can cause pretty significant damage.
Less than a second after impact, too.
Right. Yes.
I guess the way that the cars are designed, they want the people in a certain position so that the airbag doesn't also cause further harm.
Sure. Right. Yeah,
so definitely want to make sure that you're wearing your seatbelt in the back seat. And the last one is the anti-road rage law. Could you tell us a little bit about it, and if you know how it got that name?
Well, I don't really know how the name came about. The legislators coined it that as they did to Robert Scott for the seatbelt. I'm sure there was a reason for the anti-road rage. I think what it's, in the most simplest terms, is designed to facilitate a smoother flow of traffic, which we believe would, keep people calmer and eliminate these incidents of road rage. Road rage is a growing problem in the country. We'll probably see more of it as we get more and more vehicles on the road, more drivers, and patience sets in, and as we've seen, these things can escalate into assaults. Right. They can escalate into people getting killed, causing crashes intentionally. Of course, then it rises to a criminal level, and it's maybe not so much a traffic incident anymore. But what the law is designed to do is it's not really a new law either. It's an amendment to a previous law, 325A-80, which was referred to as driving in the right lane. Mm-hmm. And what it added was, so let me back up, there's always been a requirement, if you're in the left-hand lane and you're impeding the flow of traffic, you've always been required to move over. So it's nothing new. The new verbiage in the law just strictly puts a 1.5 mile limit on the length of time you can be in the left-hand lane without passing somebody. So if you're on the interstate, it is specifically designed for interstates. Mm-hmm. So if you're in the left lane, and you're running, say, at or about the speed limit, the problem comes in when you get beside somebody who's also running at or about the speed limit. You get two cars running side by side. Not a huge problem until you bring up the third car. This guy comes up and maybe he's running slightly over the speed limit, which is a separate problem, but a problem nonetheless. Right. And of course his view is he wants to get by. You're holding him up. The person who's driving in the left lane is minding their own business. They're doing the speed limit and they feel like they're doing the right thing. They're entitled to be there. Add 2 or 3 more cars come up and they can't see what's going on. So you kind of wind up with this almost NASCAR restart type configuration of vehicles out there on the interstate running 70, 75 miles an hour. People start jockeying for position, moving around. And it just creates a situation that's ripe for a multi-car crash. Right. Of course, 66% of the crashes that we work involve aggressive operation of vehicles. So you'll see that in these incidents. More surprisingly is that 50% of the people admitted that they respond to aggressive driving by being aggressive themselves. So it's kind of a snowball effect when you get a bunch of cars out there. So the intent of the law is if you're not passing somebody, move over to the right-hand lane. Leave the left-hand lane free. So
in the situation you were talking about with the 2 cars side by side, both doing at or below the speed limit, the car in the left lane after 1.5 miles should just back off and pull over to the right lane?
Yes, either complete your pass and move over or move over behind the car beside you.
Okay. So again, just defensive driving, make sure that you're doing things right and not causing the cars to back up behind you.
Right. Yeah, defensive driving, common courtesy, there's a number of things you can call it. Like I said, that the law does specifically address it now. So you can be cited for it. And there have been citations issued for that. But like I said, it was an amendment to to a previous law, so it was already being enforced. This puts a new, little more concrete, mile and a half on what you can do.
Sure.
I mean, you can still get a ticket at less than a mile and a half if you're impeding traffic, but that puts a little more, maybe it raises awareness and gives people something to hang their hat on.
I see. Now, the laws have been in effect, all three of them, the amendments rather, have been in effect since the start of September. Have you, in your 3 posts, seen tickets being issued for these already?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and like I said, in the case of the road rage, it was already an existing law, so we just continued to do what we did. We issued warnings for that time period for the amendment, but we still write tickets for impeding the flow of traffic. The seatbelts is something we've always done, and it's the same statute, added a rear seat to it. And the move over law, we still continue to enforce that.
I see. Have you found that in the new amendments, at least say on the seatbelts or any of the 3, that drivers didn't know about these laws?
Well, we certainly hear that every time we stop somebody.
Sure.
They didn't know.
Sure.
They were not even speeding. They weren't aware of that speed. They didn't know what the speed limit was. So, despite some of these laws, like we talked about the move over law being in effect since 2005, there's still be people that didn't know about it.
Sure.
Or at least, that's the excuse or that's the claim. And of course, there's no reason for ignorance of law is not an excuse.
That's right.
And kind of like you mentioned a while ago, common sense and just courtesy.
Right.
But yeah, that is something that we hear often is people didn't know about it. So that's why it's really important to do these type interviews when we really worked hard to get the word out ahead of us. Because we would much rather see voluntary compliance with the law than write a bunch of tickets.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly appreciate you coming here and talking with us about that. And you watching this video, appreciate you taking the time to do that. If you have any questions for Lieutenant Piggott, we'll be more than happy to ask him to come back and talk about this, because we want to make sure that people stay safe on the roadways and are safe out there. So Lieutenant Piggott, thank you again for your time, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, man.